My grandma spent $30,000 to join our family's Europe trip. But at the airport, my dad said, "I forgot your ticket, just go home." They had planned to leave her behind all along. I stayed with her. 3 weeks later, my parents returned and went pale when they saw me standing next to Amu because that man was. My grandmother, Hazel Draper, was the kind of woman who smelled like lavender and antiseptic, a scent earned from 40 years of pulling double shifts at Atlanta General Hospital. She was a saint in a scrub suit, a woman who had spent every waking hour saving lives and every spare penny ensuring her children, Gordon and Paula, never wanted for anything. But as I sat in the sterile waiting area of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, watching my father, Gordon, check his luxury watch for the 10th time, I realized that my grandmother's greatest mistake wasn't a medical error. It was raising wolves in sheep's clothing. The plan was supposed to be a legacy trip. To celebrate her 80th birthday and her retirement, Grandma Hazel had decided to do something she had never done for herself: spend her life savings. $30,000. That was the magic number. It was the sum of 4 decades of missed vacations, thrift store clothes, and coupon clipping. She wanted to take the whole family, my parents, my Aunt Paula and Uncle Steve and myself, on a 3-week grand tour of Europe. London, Paris, Rome. "I won't be around forever, Calvin," she had told me, her eyes twinkling behind her thick spectacles. "I want to see the Eiffel Tower through your eyes before my own go dark." I loved her more than anyone. But as the departure time for Flight AF031 loomed, the atmosphere felt off. My father and Aunt Paula were whispering in a corner, their faces tight with a strange, frantic energy. They weren't talking about museums or pasta. They were clutching a thick envelope, Grandma's cash, like it was a trophy. Grandma Hazel sat on a hard plastic airport chair, her small suitcase tucked neatly beside her. She looked frail, her hands trembling slightly from Parkinson's, but she was wearing her Sunday best floral dress. She was ready. She was glowing. "All right, everyone. Passports out," my father shouted, his voice booming with a fake joviality that made my skin crawl. We lined up at the gate. My mother, Sarah, was avoiding eye contact with me, fidgeting with her designer handbag, a bag I knew she couldn't afford on a teacher's salary. My Aunt Paula was scrolling through her phone, already looking at luxury hotels in Santorini that weren't even on the itinerary Grandma had paid for. As we reached the ticket agent, my father handed over a stack of boarding passes. 1, 2, 3, 4. The agent scanned them. "You're all set for Group A?" she chirped. Grandma Hazel stepped forward, reaching for her pass. "And mine, Gordon? You have my ticket, don't you, dear?" The air in the terminal seemed to freeze. My father turned slowly. He didn't look guilty. He looked inconvenienced. He let out a long, theatrical sigh, the kind he used when I failed a math test in middle school. "About that," he started, rubbing the back of his neck. "I went to print the confirmations this morning, and there was a massive glitch. The airline overbooked. They bumped the last ticket in our block." Grandma's smile faltered. "Oh, well, surely we can talk to them? I can take the next flight? I've waited years for this, Gordon." "It's not just that," Aunt Paula chimed in, stepping forward with a sharp, predatory smile. "We talked about it, Mom. With your tremors getting worse, the long flight, the cobblestones in Rome, it's just not safe. We decided it's best if you stay home and rest. We'll FaceTime you from the Colosseum." I felt the blood rush to my face. "What are you talking about? This is her trip. She paid for every single one of those tickets." My father shot me a look of pure ice. "Calvin, stay out of grown-up business. The money is spent. The tickets are non-refundable. We aren't going to waste $30,000 just because one person can't make it. Mom, I've called an Uber for you. It'll be at the curb in 5 minutes." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill, pressing it into her weathered palm. "Go home, get some rest. We'll bring you back a souvenir." The silence that followed was deafening. Around us, the airport hummed with the chaos of 1,000 travelers, but in our small circle, time had stopped. Grandma Hazel looked down at the $20 bill in her hand. Her fingers, the same fingers that had bandaged wounds and held my hand when I had nightmares, were shaking violently. Not from her illness, but from the sheer, crushing weight of betrayal. "Gordon," she whispered, her voice cracking, "I gave you my savings. All of it. The house repair fund, the emergency money. I gave it to you because you said you'd handle the bookings." "And I did," my father snapped, his patience evaporating. "I booked a world-class experience for the family. Do you have any idea how much stress I've been under? We need this break, Mom. Paula's mortgage is behind, and I've been working 60-hour weeks. You've had your life. Let us have a moment of joy." I couldn't believe my ears. He wasn't just abandoning her, he was gaslighting her into thinking her sacrifice was an obligation. He was using her $30,000 to fund a joy that excluded the very person who provided it. "He's right, Hazel," my mother added, her voice high and nervous. "Think of the children. Think of Calvin. Don't you want your grandson to see the world?" They all turned to me, expecting me to nod, to grab my carry-on and shuffle toward the jet bridge like a good, complicit little soldier. I looked at my father, a man I had looked up to. I looked at my mother, who had always taught me about family values. And then I looked at my grandmother. She looked so small, so disposable. She was trying to keep her chin up, trying not to cry in public, but a single tear escaped and rolled down into the deep wrinkles of her cheek. "Calvin, let's go," my father commanded, grabbing my arm. "The flight is boarding." I yanked my arm back. "No," I said. The word felt like a physical weight leaving my chest. "Calvin, don't be dramatic," Aunt Paula hissed. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime trip." "You're right, Aunt Paula. It is," I said, stepping away from them and moving to my grandmother's side. I took her small, cold hand in mine. "And I'm not spending a single second of it with people who would dump their own mother at a curb like a bag of trash." My father's face turned a deep, bruised purple. "If you don't get on that plane, Calvin, you are finished. I won't pay for your final semester of pre-med. I won't help you with the car. You are throwing your future away for a woman who won't even remember this trip in 2 years." "Then I'll find another way to pay for it," I retorted, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Because if success means becoming like you, I'd rather be a failure." I grabbed Grandma Hazel's suitcase. "Come on, Grandma. We're leaving." "Calvin, honey," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Go. Don't ruin your chance for me." "It's not a chance, Grandma. It's a crime. And I'm not an accomplice." We turned our backs on them. As we walked toward the exit, I heard the gate agent announce the final boarding call for Group A. I didn't look back, but I could feel my father's glare burning into my shoulder blades. I knew life as I knew it was over. But as I felt Grandma's hand tighten around mine, I knew for the first time in my life I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The ride back from the airport was the quietest 30 minutes of my life. Grandma Hazel stared out the window of the taxi, her eyes fixed on the blurring trees of the Georgia interstate. She still held that crumpled $20 bill in her hand, a mocking reminder of what her own children thought she was worth. When we pulled up to her modest brick ranch-style house, the silence followed us inside. The house felt colder than usual. It was a home built on the foundation of family gatherings, yet it now felt like a tomb of memories. "I'll make some tea, Calvin," she said, her voice sounding thin, like parchment paper. "Sit down, Grandma. I'll do it." As I stood in the kitchen, I realized the gravity of the situation. My father wasn't bluffing about my tuition. My bank account was nearly empty, and my parents had access to my college fund. A fund that, I now suspected, might have been borrowed to pay for their premium economy upgrades. But my anger wasn't for myself. It was for the woman in the living room who had just been robbed of her dignity. I knew I couldn't just let them go to Europe and come back as if nothing happened. I needed to see exactly how deep this betrayal went. "Grandma," I said, bringing her a mug, "I need you to show me the paperwork. The bank statements. Everything you signed for Dad and Aunt Paula." She hesitated. "Calvin, I don't want to cause trouble. They're my children." "They aren't acting like your children, Grandma. They're acting like thieves. If we don't act now, that $30,000 is gone forever, and they'll keep coming back for whatever is left." It took an hour of searching, but we found the folder. My father had been helping her with her finances for months. As I scrolled through the digital bank statements on her laptop and looked at the physical receipts, my blood ran cold. It wasn't just the $30,000 for the trip. Over the last 6 months, small gifts of $500, $1,000, and $2,000 had been transferred to my Aunt Paula's account. My father had used Grandma's credit card to buy travel gear, which turned out to be a new set of golf clubs and a designer wardrobe for my mother. They had been bleeding her dry long before the airport incident. But the smoking gun was an email I found in the trash folder of her account. It was a confirmation from the travel agency. There was no glitch. There was no overbooking. My father had explicitly requested a refund for one ticket, Grandma's, 2 weeks before the trip. He had pocketed the refund and never intended for her to step foot on that plane. He had let her pack her bags, buy a new dress, and wake up at 4 a.m. just to humiliate her at the gate. They knew, I whispered, showing the screen to Grandma. They knew for weeks. Grandma Hazel looked at the email. She didn't cry this time. A strange, sharp clarity seemed to settle over her. The golden nurse, who had seen the worst of humanity in the ER, was finally seeing the truth in her own living room. Calvin, she said, her voice regaining its strength. Call that number you mentioned. The one for the state. The Adult Protective Services? Yes, she said, her jaw setting firm. And call a lawyer. If they want to treat me like I'm dead, then they can start by learning that I'm still very much alive. While my parents were likely sipping champagne over the Atlantic, I was sitting in a fluorescent-lit office with an investigator from Adult Protective Services, APS, and a grim-faced attorney named Marcus Vance. Financial elder abuse is a serious felony, Mr. Draper, Marcus said, reviewing the paper trail I had meticulously organized. But because your father had power of attorney, he thought he was bulletproof. He thought he could claim these were gifts or necessary expenses for her care. Is he right? I asked. Not when there's a paper trail showing he refunded her ticket while keeping her money, Marcus smiled thinly. That's fraud. And since the amount exceeds $10,000, we're looking at aggravated charges. The next 10 days were a whirlwind of legal filings and frantic phone calls. When my father finally turned his phone back on after landing in London, he was met with a barrage of notifications. Not from Grandma, but from the bank, notifying him that his accounts had been frozen by a court order. The legacy trip turned into a nightmare. I started receiving dozens of voicemails. The first was from my mother, sobbing, "Calvin, how could you do this? We're stranded in Paris. The hotel won't accept the card. Your father is losing his mind." The second was from my father, his voice a low, terrifying growl. "You little brat. When I get home, you are dead. You tell that old woman to drop this investigation right now, or I'll have her declared mentally incompetent and put her in the cheapest state-run home I can find." I played that last voicemail for the APS investigator. "Well," the investigator said, clicking his pen. "He just gave us all the evidence of witness intimidation we needed." When they finally slunk back to Atlanta, having had to beg Uncle Steve's brother for loan money just to fly home, they didn't go to their suburban house. They were served with an emergency restraining order at the airport. The confrontation happened in a courtroom 3 weeks later. My father and Aunt Paula arrived looking haggard, their vacation tans faded by the gray light of legal reality. They looked at Grandma Hazel, sitting in the front row, and for the first time in their lives, they looked afraid of her. "Your Honor," my father's lawyer argued, "this is a family misunderstanding. Mr. Draper was simply managing his mother's funds to ensure she had enough for her long-term care." Grandma Hazel stood up. She didn't wait for her lawyer to speak. She walked to the podium with her cane, her back straighter than I had seen it in years. "I spent 40 years as a nurse," she told the judge, her voice echoing through the chamber. "I have seen people at their best and their worst. I always thought my children were my best work. But I realized at that airport gate that I didn't raise adults, I raised parasites. They didn't just take my money. They tried to take my spirit. They tried to make me feel like I was a glitch in their perfect life." She looked directly at my father. "Gordon, you said you forgot my ticket. Well, I've decided to forget something too. I've forgotten I have a son. The judge's gavel hit the wood like a gunshot. The fallout was total. My father and Aunt Paula were ordered to pay back every cent of the $30,000, plus damages. To avoid prison time for felony fraud, they had to sign over their rights to Grandma's estate and agree to a permanent no-contact order. My father lost his job at the firm when the news of the elder abuse lawsuit hit the local papers. My mother had to sell her designer bags and her car to pay for their legal fees. They ended up in a cramped apartment, the very kind of cheap living they had tried to avoid by stealing from Grandma. As for me, I thought my dream of being a doctor was over. I was working 2 jobs at a warehouse and a diner to stay in school. But one evening, Grandma Hazel called me into her office. She handed me a leather-bound book. It was her old nursing journal from the 1970s. Open the back cover, Calvin. Tucked inside was a life insurance policy and a deed I hadn't seen before. I didn't tell them about everything, she whispered with a wink. I had a separate account for my favorite student. The $30,000 they stole? That was just their inheritance. I was giving it to them early to see what they do with it. They failed the test. She took my hand. Your tuition is paid, Calvin. All of it. From my real savings. The ones they never knew existed. Grandma Hazel passed away 14 months later. She died in her own bed, surrounded by flowers and the smell of lavender, with me holding her hand. She wasn't alone, and she wasn't forgotten. Today, I walk the halls of Atlanta General Hospital, the same halls she walked for 40 years. My white coat has Dr. Calvin Draper embroidered on the pocket. Sometimes, when I'm exhausted after a long shift, I look at the small photo I keep in my locker. It's not a photo of a family at the Eiffel Tower or the Colosseum. It's a photo taken at a small local park, 2 days after the airport incident. It's a photo of a grandmother and her grandson eating cheap ice cream cones and laughing. I realized then what my father never understood. The most expensive trip in the world is worthless if you're traveling with people who have no soul. But a walk in the park with someone who loves you? That is the only legacy worth leaving.